What's up, soldiers? Thanks for joining me on today's video where we're going to talk about the upcoming All-American Strongman Games in Pete Beach, Florida, coming November 9th, being hosted by Luis Filero. So this is a pretty awesome event. We've got some cool classic events like the Hercules Hold, Fingles Fingers, keg toss for distance, a deadlift, the power stairs, one of my favorites, and Atlas stones. So with this video is a 8-week peak training program that you can get as a one-off purchase on TrainHeroic. The link below that is in the bio, but you can also get access to it for being a part of clubstrongman.com, a all-in-one resource and community for strongman training, featuring tips, tricks, programs, pro strongman talk, technique review, some educational courses, and a lot more. So check out clubstrongman.com or the program to follow up with this video. Now, before we get into this, please do me a favor and hit the like button and click subscribe to the channel to get more content on strongman and all things getting swole in the mind, body, and soul. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right in. We're going to talk about some of my tips, tricks, and ideas about how I think you should approach some of these events, because there's kind of a lot of overlap with some of these events, and it's a mix of events that I've never seen before. So we'll kind of talk about how to work this into your program. Let's just kind of talk about some technical stuff first with the Hercules Hold. So this is a big time grip event. So you're going to make sure in your training that you have some sort of grip dominant activity. Now, with a lot of these things, especially first to the hold and the fingers, you're not really most likely going to have access to the specific implement to train it. So what I would recommend for the Hercules Hold are things like maybe a double overhand axle hold out of a rack or a farmer's hold, and really do something where you can build up time. Your grip strength is something that's very nervous system dependent. So, we don't want to totally fry our grip because that'll affect the rest of our training. So think about starting light where you can run things for like a challenging minute, maybe a challenging 75 seconds. And you're going to slowly add up over time a little bit of weight to that, right? Now, a lot of this comes down to grit when you're doing this Hercules Hold. You need to think, once you're standing in position, you do want to brace yourself from head to toe, but try and find a nice relaxed state. You don't want to really shake and tremor too much, because that's just, again, a nervous system stimulation thing, which is going to fry you from just being too excited and being too hyped. So I like to say, sing a song to yourself while you're doing it, or practice some breathing techniques. But also when you're in training, see what's going to work for you. Some people like the hook grip. Some people like the false grip. There's all sorts of things that could work there. Now, because of the handles out to the side, a false grip probably won't work. But whatever you're going to choose, the best thing to do is just strengthen your grip with things like axle holds, double overhand, barbell holds, or a farmer's hold. Okay. Now, moving on, the Fingles Fingers, I've only seen probably less than 5 gyms anywhere that's actually got an appropriate setup for this, like a real one. So one thing we can do is think about how we're going to set up that initial heave. It's an explosive throw up. So 2 important elements to train for this are just your explosive hip extension, which will come into play later on some of these other events, but also, having that rowing power. So some things you could do to mimic this are like a tire flip, because you're getting in position and you're going to have to scoop and throw up under some weight. What you don't want to do with tire flips is do these overly heavy, where you have that technique where you're really leaning your upper chest into it. You want something that you're using your arms to pop up and flip up really quickly at the same time as your hips. So, one important thing to remember is, because we've got a lot of events, one really good technique in training is to alternate some of your weeks with events. So in the 8-week peak program, we'll have a week where we're doing tire flips and then stones, tire flips and then stones. So we're getting a lot of technical practice on some of these things. We're working our hip and back extension, and also just getting reps on these things. It's going to leave you able to train these things pretty hard without frying your system doing the same repeated movement over and over and over again. Another thing to think about too is a Viper press, because as we're going into the Fingles Fingers, we want to try and get it kind of in one big scoop up to here. Now there's no press event in any of these events, but you're gonna need some strong triceps in order to hold and walk up. So I do recommend making sure you're including some tricep work, possibly something where it's overhead like a dumbbell extension here or laying flat on a bench, but overhead tricep strength will be pretty critical here. So maybe like some inclines and any sort of good, heavy, hard tricep work to help you keep that stability in. Now, if you're somebody that's good at doing things like handstands or even just some like shoulder taps here and there, it's another good one because we're training the ability to be tight through our core and have our arms extended, mimicking the fingers as we're walking up, right? But at some point too, you might have to get it to your shoulder, give it a press up. So don't neglect your pressing strength just because there's not a press specific event. Okay, so now moving on, and so far these are posted in order as they are on the page, so we can run with the assumption that this will be the order on the day of. We've got a keg toss next. Now, very important that you notice this is for distance and not for height. So think about what that means for your trajectory. I like to cue people when we're doing tosses is that your eyes and your fingertips are going to go, or sorry, your eyes and fingertips will be where your object is going. So if we're doing a throw and we go here, that's pretty vertical. When we're doing it over a bar, we're going to overextend a little bit, look up and back, and reach slightly back with our fingertips. So same thing applies as we're doing this throw back. We want a really big extension to make somewhere between a 45 and a 60-degree angle to get that optimum amount of height, power, and distance in the throw. So let's remember that when we're doing throws, this isn't exclusively a hinge movement like a deadlift. We do want to get a little bit of leg power into it. So even if you're somebody that likes to kind of grease the groove, you could treat those first few like a kettlebell swing with a hip hinge, but we're going to want to get a little bit of a knee bend down to come back up and release. So it's not just back. We're getting our quads and our legs into it and not just hips, hamstrings, glutes, low back. Okay, so more on that. I've actually got another video coming out pretty soon about how exactly to do that. So stay tuned. What's important for you to do is track your numbers in training. So in the program, I have sandbag tosses in the program. If you have the availability and the safety to do keg tosses, it obviously would be of benefit to do that, but not everybody does. So when we're using things like sandbags, mark how far you're actually throwing these and give yourself some metrics week in and week out in order to have a target to beat and understand how far you're getting. Okay, pretty simple. What gets measured gets managed. So we've got first three up, then we're moving into the deadlift. What I like about these two here in order is I do think that explosive throws and movements are a good warm-up for things like deadlifts, right? Now, since we're kind of going through a lot of different things, what you're really going to want to focus on in your training is just general speed and power training, because there's not a lot of time to really blast your deadlift 1 rep max strength, but all this stuff here, power stairs, stones, have a lot of need and necessity for power and explosiveness in your low back. So this is not something I'd recommend to like really work up in this round of training to a 1 rep max, although we do want to push it to some of those like RPE 8s and 9s for some doubles near the end. But prioritizing speed and power is going to be a necessity to get good at the rest of these. Now, as you know, or maybe you don't, in general, training philosophy is that we're always looking to maximize force production. Okay, so that means that to get stronger, we're going to have a better time and better gains by moving lighter weights with insane acceleration than moving heavier weights slowly. That is literally the definition of force. Is force equals mass times acceleration. So to train our body to produce more force, lighter weights, by lighter I mean starting with like 60 to 70% and accelerating with absolute insane intensity. Okay, that's how we're going to do this type of deadlift training for that. Now, as with any event, you need to just practice using your straps so there's no errors, no mistakes on game day. And no, it is an ascending weight program, but if you're starting early with some good volume in your program, that shouldn't feel like too challenging. I don't think you need to rig up anything really special, like where you're adding weight, adding weight, adding weight. We just need to train for power, explosiveness, and force. All right. Now, with the power stairs, two ways to kind of approach this, which are in this program, is one, that light speed power thing, but also heavy on the upper back. Okay, so I like using things like shrugs and high pulls, to train this movement because it is a semblance of a high pull. Now, these steps are going to be 18 inches. So my general recommendation is to train a little higher than that if possible. Now, for some of you ladies out there that are a little shorter, or you men that are shorter as well, consider using a Zercher technique. One of my friends at America's Strongest Woman, Heather Sirkin, she was getting under it and scooping up and coming up. Heather is maybe 5'1", 5'2". Sorry, I don't mean to, call you too short here, but like relatively, that's maybe what you're going to have to do if it's such a heavy weight that you can maybe get off the ground, but you can't get that pull up. So in this program, we're utilizing things like power shrugs where we're using our hips to shrug up. We're using high pulls at light weight to develop that full range of motion. And then we're also using later in the program, heavy shrugs just to capitalize on that power built. So we'll be able to pull heavier weights up. But if we're doing this correctly with our deadlift, where we're working on speed and power and combine it with the strength of the upper back that the shrugs, high pulls are going to build, then you should do okay with this. One thing to kind of do as well is build your own power pin or get one, because this is a very unique thing that you can only really get a feel for by training with that handle. So I'm going to have an instructional coming out in the next week on how to build your own DIY pin using pipe from Home Depot or Lowe's. Very easy and simple. If you want to do well in this event, then go make it happen. It'll cost you about 20, 30 bucks. All right. So with that, I'm saying use your thighs. Train this ability so we're not just pulling up and like reaching out. We're going to want to pull in nice and tight, literally slam our hips into it. So as I'm going here, that should create a lip on the front of the implement where it's going up, the top corner's up and over the step, and then it could just plant on. So instead of here and like trying to just shove out, going here, boom, again, ramping that object up off our hips like we're doing a clean or a power clean and getting it up and over, right? So that leads us into our final event, which is Atlas stones. So you're probably seeing a theme here that light and explosive training for force production is going to be your best bet. So why is this again? We're not overloading your nervous system. Because of that, we're going to be able to train all of these events well and technically correct without frying ourselves. Then also, you're going to be able to build the power necessary to clear big heights. And that's important because if this is at the end of the day, you're going to need to be really refining your technique with the ability to get high in your triple extension, right? I like to suggest to people that you alternate techniques, which means do 1 week of a one motion and 1 week of a lap and load. Since this is a stone series, we're going to be having some split times and things like that. You can save energy if you know that you can just one motion the first one or two. Will also score you some bigger points if you get tied for second somewhere and you go faster. So try to learn what's going to work best for you, right? Now, another suggestion that this program also utilizes is sandbag roll-ups, right? So that's just training with a sandbag and having a big extension here and back up. Now, really, really, really good movement. So as you're probably seeing, there's a lot of overlap with really like this hip extension and back extension movements into this. So make sure that we are balancing our workload correctly. That's why I recommended earlier alternating techniques and alternating events week in, week out. So you're still hitting them with regularity, but we're not overloading the same movement, which could lead to injuries, negative patterns, CNS fatigue, and things like that. The other thing you need to think of is, since a lot of this stuff comes from this position we're lifting, this is going to create a lot of tension in your hip flexors and your psoas. So I really recommend taking a lot of good time to stretch out your hips, stretch out your back, your hips, all that area. Well, I said hips twice, but I mean more specifically like your hip flexors and then your internal and external rotation for your hips, and then also your glutes, all of those areas that are all interconnected. This also means your thoracic spine as well, leading up, this upper area of our spine. There's a lot of, loaded movement here. So we want to make sure that your chest is staying open and that your shoulders are staying back, which happens through a lot of thoracic rotation, mobility, and stretching. So with this program, if you're in clubstrongman.com, there's also mobility guides. So if you don't know exactly what any of this stuff means, like stretching your hip flexors or your thoracic spine, check it out in the mobility guide and ask me some questions. I'd be more than happy to help guide you. But we are going to cover a lot of this if you have that Train Heroic program right in there. So if not, again, hip flexors, thoracic spine, chest, lats, stretch all of those. Now, my last consideration is to train stairs and stones occasionally under fatigue. That's going to happen as you get deeper into your program, right? Since these are kind of the things that are last in the day, I just want to make the recommendation that you're not training this first in your day. You're going to be doing it fifth and sixth at the competition, which means you're not going to be completely fresh going into that event on the game day. So use that in your training. You want your training in as many instances as possible to mimic what's going to be happening at the competition. So don't do events like power stairs and stones first. Now, one exception to this is the deadlift, because there's so much that can be built on the deadlift itself. It's a foundational movement to everything we're doing in Strongman. That should be more near the top of your workout because it affects and impacts and improves pretty much everything else that you're going to be doing. So that's an exception there. But when we get to more event-specific things like the stairs and the stones, allow yourself to do those a little bit fatigued so you're ready to handle it on game day. So that's that. I am open to some more questions. If you have anything else that you would want to know about this, you can contact Luis Valero or me. Luis is running it. I'm just USS State Chair and a strongman coach. So if you're interested in checking out my 8-week peak program, there's a link to it directly below on the TrainHeroic Marketplace. And also you can get it as part of your membership on clubstrongman.com. So if you're in there, we're going to have a page in there in the discussion channels. We'll say, which are you competing in? If you want access to this program, just shoot me a message on there and I'll send you an access code to get it right on your phone. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Hope you train hard, and more importantly, train smart, and have a championship day.